Welcome to the Market Mystics Podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in.
You ever think about forever?
I do think about forever.
It's a weird thing to think about.
Kind of, and kind of not. I feel like I think about it more, probably more since I have gotten on the train of the concept of being deathless. And what that looks like here on Earth and then beyond. It can be kind of intense, though.
Yeah. I think partly the reason it's intense is because we have such a built-in feeling of that things aren't forever, because everything that we see around us has seasons of like life and death and life and death. And so it's kind of hard to imagine eternity, kind of hard to think about that. But yeah, I do think this is something I heard. I don't remember where, maybe it was on this podcast. When someone was talking about the concept of deathless, and they were like, all you have to do is look at little kids who are stunned by the fact that something died to know that that's not just part of your like born genetic way. Like that's something that you witness and is kind of like shocking. Like, what do you mean? Like, and I think like, okay, so I'm sure you could take that and you could argue it however you wanted to, but the way I heard the person go with it was like, that should show you that when you're young and you come from eternity, like your mindset is just things should just, there should just be life.
That's super interesting. You know what it makes me think of? I think we've talked about this, maybe not on the podcast, but in real life. We've talked about kind of the mandate of Judas. And that spirit, that soul, whatever you want to say, that was sent to the earth for this purpose. Like somebody's going to have to fulfill this part of that prophecy. And they're like, yeah, I'll do it. Which is mind blowing to begin with. But it makes me think, like, I wonder if there's something innate in him as a child who would not have thought that, would have already been aware that that was part of it.
That's a good question.
I mean, obviously we don't know the answer, but it makes me think that, because I also hold the belief that there's kind of a signing up of free will, if you will, when people come into this earth, and it may have been the purpose all along for them to always be paired with these other people who are already here, whatever. I don't know. But I kind of think that we sign up for this.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, about the like Judas situation. Sorry. Because in some translations it says that like Satan embodied Judas, like Judas became a container for Satan. He did the action, and then afterwards he was so appalled by what happened that he chooses to end existence. I was trying to think of like a YouTube friendly way to say that. Like, and I'm wondering like how much did he know of what he was supposed to do, or did he just, or yeah, I don't know. Did he know exactly the details of what was going to happen, um, or just, one thing? Like, I don't know. I think it's interesting. Um, it's interesting to really look at all of life, and with that idea of, did I agree to this? Um, and how much influence do I have for it to be different? Because I think if you look at
Yeah.
the I agreed to this, there very easily could be a like predestined type of mindset. Like,
Mhm.
there's nothing you can do about it. This is just how it was going to be forever and always, and it was never going to be change. It was never going to change. Like that, I think is a really interesting. Uh, I think that's a challenging path for me to go down. Is
Hmm.
that predestined mindset
Yeah,
of, like, this is just how things were always going to be.
sure.
Um, but I don't know.
This is what it makes me think of. I think it's a combination of predestination and free will. So, like the agreement, the conscious agreement to fulfill what you're meant to do. So, I think about Jesus, and I mean, he fulfilled all the prophecies, right? And he led this life. But there was a point where he was in the garden knowing what was to come,
Mm,
that he would be crucified or at least killed,
yeah,
um, and asking if the pass could cup or the pass could cup from him, the cup could pass for him, right?
yeah.
And he chose to go with what was the Father's will, but he had a choice in that,
Mm,
right? He could have run away, he could have done other things, but it makes me wonder, and this might get me kicked out of Christianity, and I know that, but it makes me wonder if some of the prophets that came before him that looked like they were fulfilling that specific prophecy, if they just made a choice when it came to some of those things that were to be fulfilled, um, to let the cup pass
mm.
and not go forward with it. So, is there a destiny that is like predestined, right? Is there forethought in it? Is something already written, but do we also have the free will to go forward with it? I think both are probably true.
Yeah, I think there probably is. Um, I think there probably is some of both, and I think that's the, I don't know if argument's the right word, but like the thought process of the, like, omnipotent, all-knowing, all-powerful God. Like, well, he already knew that you were going to make that choice, but he gave you free will. Well, um that's not exactly free will in the way most people would think of free will. And so I think there is probably a bit of both. Like, there is probably a little bit um of both things at play. And I don't exactly know what that looks like. But not knowing exactly what that looks like is exactly the idea for today's episode. um, because we wanted to talk about, um, a verse in Ecclesiastes that talks about, God placing eternity in our hearts.
Yeah, I was in some meeting, I don't know, and somebody talked about this part of this scripture, but we're going to talk about the entire verse, not just like the part. But the part that they talked about is that God has put eternity into man's heart. That's part of Ecclesiastes 3:11. Um, and when I heard, I just wrote it down real quick. Like, I think we could probably talk about this. It piqued my interest because I think it's super interesting to think about that forever. Like that question you led with. Do you ever think
Mm-hmm.
about forever? That eternity is actually residing within us. But then the rest of the verse just goes and mixes it all up. So
Yeah.
it starts with God makes everything beautiful in its time. And then also he's put eternity into man's heart. But then it goes on to say, but man can't find out what God has um, from beginning to end. Like he can't, no man can figure out the work of God and everything he's done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm paraphrasing that because there are a lot of different versions
There's a lot of different versions,
and
and
they
some of
kind of
them
say a
have.
lot of different things.
I was gonna say some of them sound pretty different. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, so let me just start with kind of old faithful King James, right? KJV. So many people think that this is the only version you could ever read or should ever read. But let's start there. He hath made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he hath set the world in their heart so that no man can find out the work that God makes from the beginning to the end. But then let's go to the other extreme, Josh. Could you read the Message?
True. God made everything beautiful in itself and in its time, but he's left us in the dark so we can never know what God is up to, whether he's coming or going.
Okay, that one was way more tame than the one that I found online.
Well, it's just different because the one we were reading online goes into the next few verses.
Oh, that's true. It was weird, you guys. You should look it up.
Yeah, it's very weird. But I think it's interesting the way it phrases that because instead of saying he's placed eternity in our hearts, it phrases it as, but he's left us in the dark. And I was looking this up in the NIV, and in the NIV, it has a footnote that says, like the NIV translated as, he has also set eternity in the human heart. But then it has a footnote that says, or he has also placed ignorance in the human heart, which is much more the take that the
Message.
message takes. So instead of it being eternity in our heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done, it says he's placed ignorance in the heart so that and no one has can know what God has done.
Okay, these are three very different things, though. So KJV says, set the world in their heart.
Yeah.
Um, most other, every other translation says, put eternity into man's heart. And then you're saying that NIV says, or it could be ignorance in their heart. So is it eternity? Is it the world? Or is it ignorance? Because those things seem very different to me.
Those things do seem very different in English. I'm curious, like, obviously Kim and I are not Hebrew scholars, but I'm curious like what what that would mean in the original language, how they would have taken it, and why do we translate it three different ways? Like that's
Can you look it
interesting
up?
to me. I was working to get there.
Okay, you look it up. I want to say this about it. The reason this piqued my interest is because I think that sounds like such an honor to have been bestowed the ability to hold eternity in our hearts, in our individual hearts. And like, what a thing for God the Creator to bestow that upon his creation to just have as we walk out our lives in the earth. Like to me, it seems very beautiful and like an honor that he's bestowed upon us. Um, have you found anything?
Yeah, and I'm curious how they get like ignorance because the the word is olam, and it means always, ancient, anymore, continuance, eternal, everlasting, long, old, perpetual, at any time, um, and the world without end. So I
Huh.
do think probably eternal is the better
Translation.
word. Um,
I
yeah.
mean, I like that. I like that a lot. Although it's an interesting, I feel like it's a dichotomy a bit to say he's put in us eternity in our hearts, but um, no one can fathom what God has done. So is
So,
he outside of eternity? So people always say like God's outside of time, but is God outside of eternity?
or is God just eternity? I don't know. Um,
Hmm.
so the way I have heard this verse, probably the majority of my life phrase like spoke about would be like it's the fact that he put eternity in our heart that makes people long for something more because there's like a knowing that there's supposed to be more. Um, but it's the fact that we can't know it that that's like the mystery of it. It's like, oh, well, we can't quite know what it is. So we keep searching. Like there's all these different things that we like. It's why we pursue God, I guess. Like, is the fact that there's something in us innately that knows it's different, that there's something more out there, but yet we don't know what it is. So we keep searching.
Hmm. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
I
it's
don't know.
also important to like read what comes before and after because like Ecclesiastes can be kind of a dark book. Um, but I really think more so it's just like the true groanings of someone's heart. Like, like the before that, it's like a very famous part of the scripture that's like everything has its season. There's a time to plant and a time to reap.
Mhm.
And like there's all these like that's a very popular thing. Um, but sometimes that's like talked about in a kind of a dark way because uh it the whole book can sound kind of depressing at times, but I really think it's just someone who's wrestling with meaning and wrestling with life. And I think that like even this verse it's like oh, I'm there's a time for all this, and I know there's something more out here, but I can't figure it out. like
Hmm.
uh yeah.
That's interesting. Well, and I guess in that, first it's talking about there's a time for weeping, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to seek, a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to cast away. Like all of these times for things, right? Like it's all these seasons. But then he says, I've put eternity. So it's interesting that it's talking about time first.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, I've put all of that inside of you, right?
Yeah.
I keep using my hand like this and it gives a thumbs up. Sorry.
AI
I'm
is
a hand
great.
talker,
It's like
not
I
the
think I
best
know
for
what she
audio.
wants. She wants a thumbs up rate.
I know it's AI going, yeah, I agree. Just
Yes.
kidding. Totally kidding. Well, I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing. And again, I'm not the biblical scholar that some are. Um, but this for me still feels like what a privilege.
Yeah. I think it's great that there are That there are a lot of verses in the Bible that you could read a lot of different ways, because mm, that's like what brings the mystery that keeps you engaged in relationship.
For sure.
There's not just one defined way that this has meant only and ever. Um, and I think that keeps you in relationship, because you are constantly searching it out through relationship to find what it means and why that's important to you.
Yeah. Do you know, um, when I first started, I don't know, I guess seeking to hear from the Lord, it was all through scripture. And that was how he first spoke to me. And the religion in me wanted to say, oh, he could never do that. Somebody else would obviously know what this means better than I ever could, except that he kept doing it. And even still, if I need, like, if I'm stuck, if I've hit a roadblock, I can't hear from him, whatever, I can still go to the scripture and hear his voice. And it may be the same verse that I seek 10 different times, and he says 10 different things to me through it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why, here's me being critical, this is why I think people who are biblical scholars or who know how to properly exegete the word, I think they might be missing it, because he's so actively speaking through it that I don't know that you could say that this one scripture can only ever mean this one thing
Right.
to the entirety of humanity, you know? But I think that's the beauty of scripture, is that it kind of doesn't matter that it was written thousands of years ago. It can still be active and true and speaking to you today, even though culturally, when it was written, it was might have been written about something completely different, but it doesn't really matter because God can use anything.
Yes. I
You
do
know?
believe God can use anything. And
Yeah.
that's important. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay.
Listeners, if any of you are biblical scholars and you're like, oh, I actually know what this means and I have a really great thought on it, by all means, please let us know. We'd love to hear.
I would
And if
love
you
to hear
just
that.
in general have any thoughts on what it means to have eternity in your heart, but not know uh, the ways of God or what God is doing, I'd love to know that too.
Yeah, for sure. Expound, please.
Expound. Take it deeper.
I love it. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Market Mystics. If you are hungry for more, don't miss out on our exclusive bonus content available only to YouTube members. Demystify the world of cryptocurrency in the cryptosphere and explore everything from outrageous conspiracies to curious current events and out there spiritual musings. Nothing is off limits in Let's Get Weird. Become a channel member on YouTube to unlock these extra episodes. See you in the bonus episodes.